Welcome to the Slow Living Collective podcast. I'm Amy, wife, mother of two and homemaker. Come along with me as I share my love for simple living, growing in my allotment garden, diving into what it means to be an urban homesteader and embracing life as a mother and homemaker. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Slow Living Collective podcast. Today I want to talk to you about living locally and eating locally and living a more farm to fork existence, I guess, but also ways in which you can embrace your resources and that being your local resources. Now, often when we talk about living a more self-sustainable lifestyle, we think about things like maybe owning some land. We might be talking about growing our own fruit and veg in our own gardens. We might be talking about living seasonally. And for many people, some of those things, if not all of them, are just not accessible. And so I want to talk to you about how you can still live this very much sort of urban homestead life, or more of a homestead life, without having to properly dive in to homesteading. Now, I talk here a lot about homesteading and sort of regarding myself more of like an urban homesteader. I live in a flat. I don't have my own physical outdoor space other than a balcony. I don't have like a garden I can step into, but I do have an allotment, but I am very sort of aware that that is rented space and is not necessarily my own. And so I want to talk to you from the perspective of, you don't have to have land. You don't have to own a dairy cow. You don't have to want to have chickens or ducks or, any sort of poultry. You can live a life where you really do embrace the elements of maybe a more homestead, self-sufficient life, but you don't actually have to have all of this at your fingertips. You don't have to be doing the physical work yourself if that's not for you. I know for me, often people will say to me oh, I bet when you move you're going to get chickens, and I'm like, no, I'm absolutely not going to get chickens. I have no desire to get chickens. I have lots of lovely farms within touching distance. I purchase their eggs all the time, and yeah, I'm just not interested in owning chickens. It's just not for me. And it's perfectly okay to be that way. You aren't like a failed self-sufficient urban homesteader or anything like that. There is no definition of what you need to do. And if chickens aren't for you like chickens aren't for me, then, you're not failing. I promise. There is no set of standards. So I want to talk to you about how you can live locally. So you can have all these things. You can purchase your raw milk. You can purchase your eggs. You can buy ethically reared meat. You can purchase local fruits and veggies. You don't have to be the person that's doing all of those things for your family. If that is something you want to do, then by all means go for it. But for most people, I'm going to go ahead and assume that, it's not something that we can actually either easily add to our lives or, like in terms of chickens, want to add to our lives. And so let's just dive into how you can live more locally, what it means, and how you can really embrace that more self-sufficient lifestyle, urban homestead, general homestead lifestyle, without it being what you do. So there can be so many important parts about connecting with your local community and just the benefits it can bring to you and your environment. So the concept of local living really sort of encompasses this mindset where you have your lifestyle almost centered around engaging with and supporting your local community and the resources it brings you. Now, I really want to focus on it in terms of food, because I think that is like a real big sort of precursor to this sort of like self-sustainable lifestyle, is being able to, provide for your family, grow your own food in a garden, and, many people do get chickens, and you can still live in harmony with your immediate environment. You can value sort of the food that is on offer. You can just embrace the seasons and live in and eat in more seasonally. And you can do all of this, like I said, without having to do it yourself. And I think that it enables you to live the lifestyle that you desire, without having to actually always think that you have to take on the responsibility of maybe more mortgage debt, finding property that you could do all these things on. And like I said about the chickens, like for some of us it's just not what we want to do. I am more than happy to go and purchase my eggs from the farm shop, because I don't want my own chickens. Because it's not just that I don't want my own chickens, I don't want to take care of chickens. I have 2 children aged 4 and under. That is enough for me. And I have a cat as well, and I have a busy life on my allotment. I home educate the children. I just don't want the added addition of having to take care of another thing in my life. And also, we like to have the freedom of, going away for the weekend. Some of our family don't live close by. Some of our friends don't live close by. We like that freedom of being able to go. That's just not possible when you've got, chickens to look after. And well, yes, we have a cat, but it's very easy to get our cat looked after, and not so much getting somebody to look after chickens as well. So, anyway, I promise not to talk about chickens for this whole episode, but I think basically what I'm trying to get at is that you can live this sort of quote unquote homestead life without having to have the homestead. There are ways that you can live in that sustainable way where you can make your own jams and chutneys and preserve your own herbs. Maybe you want to have ethically reared meat. Maybe you want to eat organic, and you can do all of these things without having to do it yourself. There are ways that you can connect within your local community, and you can actually, purchase these things and support your local farming business. So embracing local living is, I think, really sort of key to your personal well-being, because you are creating not only this life that you desire, but you're also connecting to your community as well. And it enables you to just feel like you're able to sort of forge the connection to like living seasonally. A lot of what I talk about comes back to living seasonally and how it's just really, really natural to us. But also it makes that connection with the natural world and helps us create that healthier relationship with the environment. And it also contributes to sustainability as well, because when we're sourcing and consuming local products, we end up reducing our carbon footprint, which can be associated with long distance transportation. We're able to support local farmers and producers who are able to prioritise sustainable practices. And I just feel like much of what we purchase in places like the supermarket, it does have a lot of miles on it before it gets to our plate. And by living more locally, we are able to sort of negate that. Now, I'm not saying you have to give up using the supermarket. We do still use the supermarket. But we have noticed over a period of time that it's becoming less and less and less. So, for example, we purchase our meat from the Ethical Butcher, and they do meat from farms that practice regenerative farming. So, if you aren't aware of regenerative agriculture, it's a form of conservation, and it helps to rehabilitate the approach to both food and farming systems. It helps with soil regeneration, it increases biodiversity, it helps water cycle, and in general is really supportive of climate change. Now, we hear a lot in our media about climate change and how the cows are killing us and how we should all give up meat. But there are other ways that it's possible to continue to eat a meat diet. And in fact, for us personally, I don't want to delve too deep into this episode, but for us personally, we prioritize meat in our diet because of its bioavailability and how nutrient dense it is as a food. So it is really important to us to prioritize that, but at the same time we also want to prioritize firstly eating food that is reared ethically, and also by purchasing from regenerative farms we are able to ensure that the agriculture within the farming practices is actually helping towards climate change as well. Now, like I said, I don't want to delve too deep into that in this episode. There is a lot of resources out there that you can dive into. I know some people prioritize a meat diet, some people prioritize a non-meat diet. It's personal choice at the end of the day, and I definitely recommend, if you're curious at all, then you can delve into regenerative agriculture, regenerative farming, purchasing ethically reared meat from regenerative farms, and how that actually is almost negating what we hear in the media. Now, like I was saying, we aren't, stepping away from the supermarket entirely. We do purchase our meat, like I said, from the ethical butcher, or we purchase from our local farm shop, and the cattle are raised there, and we are aware of their practices, and we are happy with the way that they do things. Obviously, that's for each individual. You can absolutely go along to your local farm and discuss things like that. Now, I'm aware, like I said, that not everybody listening to this is going to be a meat eater, so I'm not going to delve too much into that, but there are definitely ways that you can purchase your meat sustainably and ethically outside of the sort of like our general food system in terms of supermarkets. Now, like I said, I do still purchase from the supermarket, but it has become less and less. We obviously purchase our meat elsewhere. I've already mentioned that we do purchase our eggs from the farm shop as well. That's really important to us. We also, something that is and also really important to us is eating organic fruit and vegetables. Now, preferably, I do like to purchase things that are currently in season, and that's because we like to live seasonally and eat seasonally, and that's something that's quite important to us. Now, Riverford have been something that we have started doing this year, and I absolutely love our Riverford boxes. Usually I purchase the UK seasonal veg box. Sometimes there are certain times a year, obviously, where we do have produce gaps, and therefore I can't purchase strictly UK based products. Now, I'm not purchasing UK based products because I only want to buy what's in the UK. That's not the case at all. In fact, it's more about the fact that I want to live as close to the seasons in my area as possible, and if I can purchase a UK seasonal veg box, then I know I'm going as close to that line as possible. And so there are, other options. Riverford do a number of different boxes that you can choose from, and it's up to you. There are some things that come from further afield. Everything is organic. Organic is really important to me because I'm not in agreement with sort of the herbicides and pesticides that are used on our food. Now, it does come at a cost, and I have spoken about this at length on Instagram, that actually our food budget is somewhere where we put a heavy portion of our budget towards, and that's because it's something that is really important to us. Now, I know some people try and keep their food bill as low as possible, and I completely understand that in times like these where food prices are just very expensive. It's not always the easiest option to be purchasing regenerative meat, because it does come at an additional cost. It might not be possible to purchase organic fruit and veg. And so in those situations, of course, the best thing you can do, if you're a meat eater, for example, if you want to purchase meat, then any meat is good. Any meat is going to give you the bioavailable nutrients that we need. And the same with fruit and veg as well. If you cannot purchase organic, then you're still going to get goodness from regular fruit and veg. For us, it's a personal choice in terms of like the chemicals that are used. I am not particularly happy with some of the stuff that runs through our food system. It's horrifying when you go down that rabbit hole. And so purchasing organic is something that I try and do as much as possible. It's not always 100% possible. Sometimes it's not available. Sometimes it's just not affordable. And so, like I said, our food budget is somewhere where we really sort of place a hefty part of our budget towards, but that's because it's something that is incredibly important to us. Supporting local businesses and shops, particularly places like farm shops or farmers markets, where you can purchase things like locally and ethically reared meat, locally grown vegetables, and so much more, like eggs. It's such a great way of not only eating well, but being able to put back into your local community. I know for us, like I've said, eating locally reared meat from a farm just at the end of our road is something that we do really appreciate. And when you choose to eat seasonally like we do and locally, you are making a commitment to not only your community, but like I mentioned, your carbon footprint too. And let me just caveat all this by saying we're human. We are never going to be perfect. But for us, to eat as natural and as locally and seasonally as possible is hugely important to us. So we like to know where our food has come from, the product chain, etc., etc. And that's really important. And it's another reason why we grow food on our allotment as much as possible as well. For us, we want to be as self-sufficient as we can be. But our living situation, like I mentioned, doesn't necessarily allow for that complete self-sufficiency. And I don't know if that's something we are working towards. I always thought it might be, but I'm not really sure. And I'm just sitting with that until I know what our next move really is. But like I said, it's not going to be chickens. So engaging with local resources and supporting local businesses really sort of fosters this sense of belonging, and I think a connection that sometimes we miss in what is an increasingly globalized world. So when we choose to shop locally, whether it be local shops, whether we're going to eat at local restaurants, whether we're purchasing our food that's been grown or reared locally from places like farm shops and farmers markets, we become sort of more active participants in our local economy, and that also forges this connection with people that are behind these establishments, whether that's local farmers or whether it's the people that work in the farm shops. And I find, like, when I go to the farm shop, that it's just such a nice experience from start to finish, and I really appreciate that. I always find that by supporting our local farms or community-supported agriculture, farmers markets, farm shops is really important, because it helps us to almost sustain the local food systems and agricultural practices that do exist around us. And by purchasing directly from farmers, we're helping contribute to their livelihoods, and we're almost just becoming part of this life cycle of the continuation of these small-scale, environmentally conscious farming methods. So the local farms that we have around us, they prioritise these sustainable farming practices, like I mentioned, organic or regenerative agriculture. And the latter, it's promoting soil health, biodiversity, and the minimization of harmful chemicals. And by supporting these practices, we're able to contribute to the health of our environment, and we're able to promote a more sustainable food production. But also, it does link back, obviously, to living seasonally too. And by supporting local farmers, we're able to foster this sense of food security and more resilience within our community. Because when we rely heavily on these large scale industrialized agriculture, things that we would probably purchase in supermarkets, we become really vulnerable to disruptions in the global food supply chain. And I think probably as I'm saying this, a lot of you are like, oh, yes, because have we not experienced in recent weeks and months disruptions to our food supply chain? So like I said, I don't purchase eggs from the supermarket, but when I am in the supermarket and I walk past the eggs because it's in the same aisle as the flour that I buy, I notice all the time that there are signs up saying, that there is a lack of eggs, they're doing their best, blah, blah, blah. When you go to the farm shop, there's no shortage of eggs. There is no shortage of eggs at all. So when we're relying, like I said, on these large scale agriculture, we are vulnerable to these disruptions. And I think we are noticing it more than ever. Certainly here in the UK, we are noticing, I can't speak for other places, but we are noticing disruption in the food supply chain. And when you pop along to your local farm shop or farmer's market, there's stuff there. And I think by supporting local farmers, we're reducing our dependence on these distant sources of food, and we're able to build a more resilient local food system. And this obviously helps food security and helps just ensure a more secure and sustainable food supply for the community, especially in times of crisis. And I think we're all very aware of what a time of crisis feels like after the last couple of years. Farmers markets as well are a real sort of vibrant community gathering and just spaces where individuals can connect directly with local farmers and producers. Now I know it's not possible everywhere, so if you don't have a farmers market, try and find out if you have a local farm. And I know in sort of more urban areas that might be a little bit more difficult. I live in a sort of very suburban environment where I am sort of on the edge of a town and very close to a number of sort of farms, farm shops, etc. We do have a farmers market locally as well, so I do appreciate that. I'm very lucky with that, and that's not going to be the case for everyone, but certainly do some research, ask locally, have a look online, see what is local to you, because you might be surprised. In fact, we were looking up about raw milk, and I'm not going to delve into raw milk in this episode, but we were looking up about raw milk, and it turns out that I was like, I don't really know where we could get it from. And it turns out that there is a farm just a stone throw away from me, not the farm that I get my rest of my produce from, but a different farm. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I wouldn't have even known it was there without looking it up. So certainly don't dismiss it that, oh, there's nothing near me that I know of, because there are little gems hiding in every corner. But going back to farmers markets, they often offer this really sort of diverse array of fresh, locally grown produce. Sometimes they have like artisan products, maybe like sourdoughs and stuff. Sourdough is one of those things, isn't it? Like you just seem to hear that everyone is baking sourdough, and like I'm no exception to that actually, because I do love a bit of sourdough myself. However, I often have a sourdough starter on the go. I actually haven't had one for a little while because I killed it off. And I just thought, oh, I'm not going to maintain a sourdough starter for a bit. It's a bit more difficult when, I was away a few times. It's not impossible, but, like my executive function can be zero at some point. So I haven't got a sourdough starter at the moment, but I do like sourdough starter for the discard. I really do like making things like discard crackers. I don't necessarily love making sourdough bread. So, sourdough is something that you seem to have to make if you're part of this sort of like homesteading / urban homesteading community, or want to live more sort of a self-sustainable way, like sourdough is the epitome of that. And I'm here to tell you that you don't have to bake sourdough to live a more self-sustainable lifestyle. And you can just bake regular bread, or if you really want to, you can just purchase it. So farmers market is a great opportunity to purchase some artisan products like sourdough. And also, it goes without saying, but supporting farmers markets obviously helps contribute to the local economy and promote more sustainable agriculture. And you get to enjoy the benefits of fresh, locally grown, high quality food. By supporting local farmers or community supported agriculture, farmers markets, all of those are really crucial for sustaining local food systems, promoting more sustainable farming practices, enhancing food security, and also just fostering community. So, when you choose to purchase locally grown and produced food, you are actively contributing to the well-being of the environment, the communities, and of course, our health as well. So, if you need help to identify or access local food resources in your area, here are a few tips to get you started. Now, like I said, research and explore. Just start researching local food resources in your area, and I think you'll be surprised because, like I said, there is a farm right on my doorstep that I didn't even realise. So you can look for local farms, farmers markets, maybe farm-to-table restaurants, local food co-ops. You can check online directories, local food websites, or maybe even ask your friends or neighbours for recommendations, because I think you'll be surprised. Also, visit farmers markets if you have one available. They're excellent places to find local produce, meats, dairy products, baked goods, artisan products. And so if you're able to visit your local farmers market, you'll be able to connect with local farmers and artisans. You'll be able to ask questions. You ask questions about where they operate, what their farming practices are, and just learn more about their products. And so I think if you have one available, I would definitely go and check it out. And another thing is connect with local farms. Look for nearby farms that have direct sales to the public. So I have a local farm, like I said, near the end of my road, and so it's really not that far away from me. And if you take the opportunity to visit, you can learn about their growing practices as well. And most farms have like websites or a social media page, and so you might be able to garner some information there. I think the most important thing to remember is the availability of local food resources might vary depending on, firstly, where you live, but also the season. So if you're living more locally, the chances are you're going to be living more seasonally as well. So just embrace the adventure of exploring what the local food looks like in your area, and just remember that by choosing to eat more locally, you're able to support sustainable practices and ultimately your community as well. Now, I mentioned earlier in this episode about how I really find a connection between living and eating locally to more sustainable living practices. And I wanted to dive into that before I close out this episode, because getting back to and connecting with nature is another huge part of living sort of more intentionally. Now, I know not everyone's idea of a good time is being outside, and I get that. But the earth and the whole world around us can be so healing. So figure out what works for you and go with that. Get more vitamin D on your body. Breathe in the fresh air because it feels good. And sustainable living is really important, paramount in fact, to today's world. And it entwines so closely with the concept of living locally. Sustainable living really refers to a lifestyle that seeks to minimize our ecological footprint and obviously promotes the long-term well-being of the world, the environment, and society at large as well. And when we embrace this more local living approach, we are naturally aligning ourselves with some more sustainable practices that exist and creating this really almost harmonious relationship between our actions and the environment. So living locally promotes sustainability in so many different ways, and I thought I would share just a few of why sustainable living and local living really do go hand in hand. So Firstly, it reduces our environmental impact. By living locally, we are able to minimise the need for, firstly, the long distance transportation of goods and services. Now, it's very easy for me to buy a piece of beef that maybe is from Brazil, or get my bananas from Africa or the Caribbean. Now, I live in the UK, right? There is no way on earth that I am growing a banana here. So I'm just using it as an example. But there are there is a lot to be said for reducing our food miles, because I think if we added up our food miles, we would be shocked. And like I said, I'm not perfect, and I'm also not trying to be perfect, but I'm just doing the best with what I know and what is available to me. But by reducing the long distance transportation of goods, this is obviously going to reduce carbon emissions. And carbon emissions is what is taking the world under. So if we can reduce that in our food intake, then I feel like we're at least doing our bit. In fact, I'm I don't want to go too deep into it, like I tried to skim over it earlier as well. Like I said, we're very passionate about continuing with a meat diet, and it's important to us, just for us and our family, for all the reasons I shared below. And the argument is often strongly in, well, like cows emissions are no good for the environment, but then we're happy to purchase X, Y, and Z from Argentina, from Brazil, and have it shipped here and packaged somewhere else. And, it all add into the carbon emissions when I can go and purchase some meat from a farm 5 minutes up the road from me. Not even that. And so, it just depends on how you want to live your life. And like I said, whether you eat meat or whether you are, plant-based, looking at our carbon emissions can really help, because that is really associated with the transportation of our goods and helps to combat climate change. By supporting local agriculture and consuming more locally sourced food, this is really reducing the carbon footprint that is associated with food miles, as the distance that it's travelled from farm to plate is so significantly reduced. And not only that, we are able to preserve natural resources. We are able to prioritise products that are made with sustainable materials, that produce locally, and it means that we, by embracing local food sources, we're often able to support organic farming practices, water conservation, and the protection of local ecosystems. And not to mention, but it is supporting our local economy as well, which contributes to job creation and economic resilience in your local area. And it almost fosters a more self-reliant and resilient local economy, which then is less vulnerable to these fluctuations of the markets. And like I mentioned earlier as well, it provides great food security locally. And I think, like I said earlier, this is something that we are noticing more and more. Living locally does encourage self-sufficiency by utilising our local resources. When we're able to engage with more local producers, farmers, artisans, we are able to really tap into the expertise that it just exists within our community that we probably don't even know. And that in turn empowers these individuals and our community to just rely less on external sources and develop these more sustainable practices. For me, it just helps align our life with the principles of environmental stewardship and social responsibility. We are able to help nurture our local community, ecosystem, and just create, hopefully, a more sustainable future for ourselves and for future generations. So, whether it's through supporting local business or consuming locally sourced products, we are able to just slowly but surely be able to be more sustainable. And I think just living locally helps contribute to a more resilient, vibrant, and hopefully more environmentally conscious world. There's been a lot in this episode, and as we wrap up, I just want to encourage you to take action and just embrace the power of living locally. Explore your local community, take time to truly get to know it, discover the hidden gems, the local businesses, and the local food resources available in your local area. Engage in your community, attend farmers markets, and visit local farms, and just really embrace the richness and diversity of what your community has to offer. Whether it's supporting local farmers, artisans, business, just make a conscious effort to choose local options where possible. Seek out local food sources. Frequent farmers markets. Go and visit your local farm. Embrace the flavours and stories behind these locally sourced products. And just get involved in your local community. And most important thing, share. Share your experience, spread the word about the benefits and importance of living locally. Share what you find with family, friends, and other people who live locally, but also those who don't. And just encourage others to explore their own local communities and engage with their own resources. Because together, by doing that, we can start creating this ripple which will hopefully affect positive change. By taking action and embracing local living, we can make such a significant impact on our personal well-being, our health, and also the sustainability of our environment. So go and explore your local community and let me know how you get on. Engage with your local resources, and let's just build this stronger, more connected, and more sustainable world. So I want to hear what you do. Come find me on Instagram. You can find me there at Life on Plot 44. I'm probably gardening. That's probably what I'm doing. Spring, summer, and early autumn, that's where you'll find me. But come find me. Tell me your thoughts on living locally and how you are working to, create change and create this more self-sufficient world and just step away from what is considered the norm. So thank you so much for listening. As always, I really appreciate each and every one of you. I've already said it, but I'll say it again. Come find me on Instagram. You can find me there at Life on Plot 44. You can also find me on the blog, which is theslowlivingcollective.com. Until next time, guys, thank you for listening, and I will catch you in the next episode.